Hello friends, we are in the third week of the course and we deal with Narayan's essay on toasted English in this presentation. We will see the objectives, Narayan's life and writings, his essay Toasted English, and then focus on the theme, form, language and literary qualities of Narayan's essay. Then we will further examine human relationships and reflections on life and see how we can take some lessons from this essay on toasted English. Let's see the objectives now. To appreciate Narayan as a professional writer of novels, short stories and essays, we have to understand that Narayan chose to write in pre-independent India in English for readers who can understand English. He made a profession out of writing. To discuss Narayan's essay on toasted English, that is the main purpose of our presentation. To highlight the differences between British and American English. We know that English is the same, but the same language divides two major countries in the world. To underline the need for using language for communication transparently. That's why we have chosen this essay, Toasted English. When we use a language, particularly English, we have to ensure that we communicate with the people with whom we are interacting. To understand Narayan's concerns for taking English to the streets and marketplaces in India, Narayan is very specific about it. He doesn't want English to be confined to colleges, schools, courts and other administrative buildings. He wants language to go to the streets and marketplaces. Probably now we can say that English language has gone to marketplaces, particularly malls and things like that. To analyze the essay from thematic, formal, linguistic and literary perspectives, and finally we will think about the role of language in fostering human relationships. There is a beautiful lesson that we can learn from this. Let's see the life of Narayan. Narayan was originally known as Rasipuram Krishnaswamy Narayanaswamy. He was born in 1906 and died in 2001. It was the British novelist Graham Greene who shortened the long name to the simple short name Narayan. Particularly the Western readers would not be able to pronounce such a long name. Narayan is known for the creation of a fictional town called Malgudi, which is similar to Thomas Hardy's fictional town Wessex, which also is further similar to what we have in American literature from William Faulkner, who created a fictional town called ÄúToasted. Narayan is a novelist and a short story writer, an essayist and a travelogue writer. Primarily he is a writer. He made writing his profession in pre-independent India, much against the wishes of his own family members. Later on he took to publishing his own books, and he has a famous publishing house in Chennai, Indian Thought Publications. Even today his books are published by Indian Thought Publications. Then he went on to become a writer in residence in many universities in the West. For his contribution to literature in English in India, he was awarded Sahitya Akademi Award in 1951, Padma Bhushan Award in 1964 and Padma Vibhushan in 2000. Actually, he was also nominated a Rajya Sabha member for 6 years from 1989 to represent arts and literature. One of the quotations that we have from Narayan is really thought-provoking. He says, "A profound unmitigated loneliness is the only truth of life." We have to remember that Narayan married a lady he loved, again much against the wishes of his family because of the mismatch in horoscope, but then when his wife died, he lived a life of loneliness, unmitigated loneliness. Loneliness never reduced, it went on increasing throughout his life. Narayan has written lot number of novels, non-fiction works and short story collections. Let's have some examples here. For novels we have Swami and Friends, The English Teacher, Waiting for the Mahatma, The Guide and A Tiger for Malgudi. And for non-fiction works we have just one collection here, A Storyteller's World, from which we have taken the essay Toasted English. Then there are many short story collections like Malgudi Days, An Astrologer's Day and other stories, Lolly Road and other stories, A Horse and Two Goats and other stories. All of them deal with common people, common experiences with humor and irony. Toasted English is the essay that we deal with. Toasted English refers to English muffins, for which we have the picture here, something like bun. That's what we have in American restaurants, but it is called toasted English because some kind of reference to the origin is still maintained in America. There is a similar process that happens to the American language as well. Like toasting of this bun, we have toasting of language as well. There was a phase of throwing out the British people from the American soil, but Americans chose to retain their language and let it flourish on the American soil. Because of the differences between two locations, we have a difference between the American language and British English. English is called the American language in America. That's why we are using that expression American language. There is a process of toasting which is similar between toasting of bread or toasting of language. That's why we refer to this metaphor of toasting, which is dominant in this essay. What is the result of this toasting of English in the US? Formalism surrounding the use of English has been abundant in the American context. Americans chose to free the language from the stifling tyranny of the passive voice, though we have used one passive construction just now. As a result of toasting English, we have accurate, brief and clear use of language. However, there are certain idiosyncrasies, that is peculiar uses of language, which still remain in the American language. Narayan brings out the differences between American and British English with some examples. He gives certain examples for American English like this. On parks, we can see expressions like newly planted, don't walk. When there is a place for no parking, we can see a signboard saying absolutely no parking. In American office doors, we can see do not enter. Similarly, on traffic signs, we can see very clearly go or wait. And similarly, in individual offices, we can see the name of the person and then come in or keep out. Here we have this example, Mark Stevens keep out, which Narayan saw in one American studio. In contrast, we have British and Indian English, which is not so easy to understand. For example, trespassing prohibited. How many people will understand it? Similarly, we have one more sentence. Under Municipal Act so and so, this area has been reserved, etc., etc., and any vehicle stationed thereon will be deemed to have contravened subsection so and so of the Motor Vehicles Act, etc., etc. What the common man needs to understand is no parking or absolutely no parking. But if you have a notice like this, Narayan uses that word inscription to underlie some gentle irony in the use of language. Narayan goes on to give more examples like check in American English. He gives special emphasis to this particular word check in American English. He calls it the American national expression. He gives many examples of check as it is used in the American context. I'll check means I will find out, investigate, examine, scrutinize, verify or probe. When we use that expression your check, we refer to your ticket or token or whatever you may have to produce for something. Then we have check room, which means cloak room. Again we have check girl, which means one who takes care of your coat, umbrella and other things. We have another common expression check in and check out. Normally we see them in hotels to refer to one's arrival or departure from a hotel. We have a beautiful sentence here to represent Narayan's humor. If you are ever hard up for a noun or a verb, you may safely utter the word check and feel confident that it will fit in. That's how Narayan gently points out the difficulties with language use or interactions between people. Some more examples of American English we have here. Narayan quotes this word fabulous and gives some examples. Oh, those cats of mine are fabulous, to refer to some eccentricity. When we say, oh, he is fabulous, it can mean a sincere compliment to an expression of one's own lunacy. Another easy sound that everyone produces is okay in different forms like O.K. or OKA or simply OK. Another common expression we have in American English is yeah. It can seal off a sentence without further ado. On the other hand, when we say yes sir, yes darling, this expression is conceivable. We may not be expecting some sentence like yes sir, yeah darling, that is unthinkable. What is the difference between yes and yeah? Yes is long, yeah is short. Another expression that we find in American context is great. Whatever you say, people will say great. So everything is great. And also another expression is there, sounds interesting. It may mean what does it matter to me? Narayan focuses on the Bazzar status of English. That means how ordinary people use language on the street while they travel or when they are doing their business. In London, he observed a conductor politely saying thank you before and after giving tickets. He wouldn't say ticket, ticket as we find in other cities, especially in India. Conductors would yell at people, ticket, ticket, that means we have to buy the ticket. In Western countries, we have other peculiar expressions like can I help you? It may look very ordinary, but then there is a hidden meaning when we listen to this expression, can I help you? The hidden meaning is something like this, have you any business here? If so, state it. To add more meaning, Narayan says, evidently you have wandered off into a wrong place, go away. Can I help you means get out of this place. Similarly, another common expression that we use is excuse me. When people say excuse me, they mean what do you mean by standing there gaping at the world while you block everybody's passage? Stand aside, man. The whole thing is said in one expression, excuse me. One more example that we have here is a polite expression, would you like to wait? It means we are expected to wait, though the tone of the expression appears to be one of consultation, but we don't have a choice. When somebody says would you like to wait, we can't say no, we have to accept and say yes, I'll wait. While examining American language and British English, R.K. Narayan proposes that we should have a Bharat brand of English. Narayan was concerned with English throughout his life because he learnt English sincerely, seriously, passionately, and then he chose to make a career out of English for his life to write novels, short stories and other kinds of writings. He has also written about English in other essays like English in India. He felt that English was confined to media, administration, law and education. To combine all these expressions, we can say English is a male language in India. But R.K. Narayan doesn't want to suggest that there should be something like mongrelization of English, that is chutnification of English. He didn't imagine, but later on Rushdie would. He didn't want something like a tourist or butler English. He wanted a proper English with a specific Indian Swadeshi identity. That's what he was trying to do through his own writings. How did Narayan Indianize English? He wanted English to be used for several purposes. He wanted an English for multi-purpose uses, to be used for all purposes, anytime, anywhere, with anyone. It should not be used only for education or law or administration. It should be used by common people everywhere, on dusty streets, in marketplaces and under the banyan tree, of course for telling stories. That is the first passion of R.K. Narayan. The whole idea is to have a distinct identity for English as the Americans have, with the dignity of grammar and rules of usage. R.K. Narayan wanted to have a Swadeshi stamp like we have in Madras checked handloom, shirt or Tirupati Laddu. Tirupati Laddu is Tirupati Laddu. You can't find any Laddu like Tirupati Laddu. So he wants to have, or he wanted to have, an English which would be Indian English. Here is an example of a word pile, which refers to a raised platform on either side in front of the main door in a house in Indian villages. So this is a kind of Indianization that he wanted to have in his own writings. He achieved to some extent. Let's see the kind of Bharat English or Bharat brand of English that we have in the Indian novel. Before independence, we have one kind of Indianization, that is to talk about Indian subjects, characters, thoughts, myths and sensibilities. Some of the pre-independent Indian novelists that we have are Raja Rao, R.K. Narayan and Mulkraj Anand. These three are considered to be the trinities of Indian English novel. Then when we come to the post-independent period, particularly just before this liberalization, we have Chetnification of English. Many writers started experimenting with the language in the novel. They looked beyond the common themes of village or Indian independence, and they looked for more far-reaching themes. Some of the examples of post-independent Indian novelists who have a great name for themselves are Salman Rushdie, Arundhati Roy, Kiran Desai, Aravind Adiga. All these four are Man Booker Prize winners. And then we have Chetan Bhagat and Amish Tripathi, who are the craze among Indian college students and the general youth today. Let's see the thematic contrast within the novel. Obviously, there is a contrast between American English and British English. Then we can also see some kind of implicit contrast between British English and Indian English, because we were also under the influence of British English for long, while Americans were able to create an independent identity for themselves in the American language. Indians have not done that so far, at least until the time of R.K. Narayan. That's why he wanted to have a specific Bharat brand of English, Indian English. We also have another contrast between pure English or modified and impure English. These two terms are further understood as standard English and substandard English. I have used the quotation marks for them because we have difficulties with this kind of distinction today. We find clear contrast between freedom and tyranny. Freedom in the case of American language, tyranny in the case of British language. Transparency, normality or active use of language, concise language in American English. On the other hand, we have tyranny, opacity, that means it's not very clear, opaque, abnormality, passive voice and circumlocution, that means it's not easy for us to understand. To say the same thing, we use so many words, we don't come to the main point, that is beating about the bush. So this kind of clear distinction between American English and British English is shown to us so that we can see the value of clear English, good English or transparent English or the language that gives us freedom to express our thoughts very clearly, succinctly to our audience. Let's see some aspect of the form of the essay. It's a prose piece, it's a reflective essay with an element of humor. There is of course some logic, but then there is an element of reflection in the essay, what kind of language we Indians should use, particularly with reference to English language. So R.K. Narayan has the aim to suggest the use of English for everyday communication for all purposes, anytime, anywhere. He gives examples of English usage in America, Britain and also in India because of the connection, close connection between British English and Indian English. Narayan gives insight into culturally nuanced understanding of language. Unless one reads the essay Toasted English, one may not know the real meaning of can I help you or excuse me. That's where culturally nuanced understanding of language we learn by reading more and more of writings by writers who have devoted themselves to see the creative possibilities in communication. Narayan's suggestions for the transformation of language into a practical medium of communication will be accepted by everyone. There are certain lessons that we can learn from this essay. Language is a medium of communication. So what we have to do is to use it to reflect our personality and identity. When we don't connect ourselves with the language, then our personality and identity will be missing. Let's look into the language aspect of this essay, Toasted English. It deals with personal narration. Narayan tells us his own experiences of having seen how English is used in America or in Britain or in India. So he argues for a simple language. He says, I may make my point clear if I mention the example of the word check, which may safely be labeled the American national expression. On the one hand, Narayan praises American active use of language. On the other hand, Narayan uses the passive voice within the same expression. Clarity will be achieved more with active voice. I am also using passive voice probably because we are trained that way. What we need to do is to use active construction and avoid passive constructions as far as possible. Narayan appreciates Americans for avoiding passive construction, but he uses passive himself very often in his essay. We can also notice the irony and humor through the deft use of language in Narayan's essay. Let's see the literary aspect now. Clearly, we have many examples of metaphor in this essay. The very first one, Toasted English, is an example of metaphor. Tyranny of the passive voice is again another metaphor. So we have more metaphors in inscription for notice, confinement of language to certain places, snapping an utterance in mid-sentence, time is ripe like a fruit for bringing about changes in the use of language. Mongrelization of language, stamp of impression. Just as we put a stamp on a piece of paper, we must put a stamp on our use of language. We have another case of circumlocution. A beautiful example we have, this is a long one, here we have a short phrase. Under Municipal Act so and so, this area has been reserved. So we use more words than necessary to convey the idea absolutely no parking. How do we understand human relationships in an essay which deals with language? We have to see the close relationship between language and human beings. That's why we say people come together to throw people out. In the case of America, we found that Americans came together to throw their own brothers and sisters out of America, and they wanted to have an independent nation. What we need to do is to practice a clear use of language to adopt a friendly attitude to people. Clarity and friendliness in fact go together. If we don't have anything to say, then we can remain silent. We can also remain silent if we don't want to be disturbed by others. In all kinds of conversation, we have to be polite, and the situation may be different or it may not be to our liking. Even when we say some negative meaning, we have to be very polite. In fact, politeness is a virtue, it's a precious virtue. We have to respect the individual identity of people in their use of language, any language for that matter. Let's see some reflections on life. Americans threw the English people out of their country, but not the English language. They went on using the language and made it their own. They established a specific linguistic identity for themselves. We have to understand that human beings are distinguished by their use of language for communication and other purposes. The same language can unite and divide people. We have many examples like English, we have the example in other countries as well. So the same language can unite people or divide people. We need to accommodate the idiosyncrasies, that is peculiarities of people and their language. We can use any language for communication if it helps in realizing our potential. That's the crux of the point. Narayan used English for realizing his own creative potential, to express himself, to discuss, to deal with the Indian reality in fiction for Indians and for other readers from different countries. What are the takeaways from this essay? We have to realize that languages change. Like language, people to change. We can see the impact of information technology and smart mobile phones now. Our language has changed. We use touch screen, or we send SMS, or we WhatsApp. Our language has changed. Though we may not use English for our communication purpose, there are people saying "What's up" every day. Language and behavior go together, so we have to watch our language very carefully. We have to use simple and clear language to communicate our ideas to anyone. In fact, clear use of language is a service to humanity. It's not that you have to spend money to serve humanity, you have to spend time to serve humanity. If you use language carefully, precisely, exactly, that itself is a service to humanity. Anyone can use any language to become a great author, provided one learns and uses the language clearly and confidently, like R.K. Narayan. To give you a summary of the discussion on R.K. Narayan's essay Toasted English, we can say we have seen the objectives of discussing this essay. We saw the life of R.K. Narayan and also mentioned some of his writings. We discussed Toasted English in detail, and then we discussed the theme, form, language and literary qualities of this essay. We focused on human relationships and thought about certain reflections which will be useful for us, particularly with reference to using language clearly for a good life. Some of the takeaways for us to remember from this essay are to use language clearly so that we can serve people, to use language clearly so that we can express our friendly attitude to people. We have some references for you. Whenever, wherever possible, please look into them. You can read more about R.K. Narayan's own essays in this book, A Storyteller's World, Essays, Sketches, Stories, and you can also read some critical articles. Help yourself to learn more about R.K. Narayan and see how language is toasted by Americans, by Indians, and we can also see how we change English language ourselves. Thank you.